And there, I remember that I had a great-grandfather named Moshe Silberkasten, and if he indeed moved to America, maybe this was the place to find out something about him. So that's what I did every evening that I spent in Salt Lake City with my colleagues for 2-3 weeks. Every evening I spent at the library. The library is amazing because it's open until 10, or it was, I don't know today, but it's open in principle until 10 p.m. And people have to be kicked out of that place because they don't want to leave, basically. So I started searching for Silberkasten. And there were at the time, this is almost 30 years ago, there were various databases which were on disks. For example, there was a CD-ROM telephone disk for the entire USA, which I searched. And then there were censuses, and I looked at the 1920 US censuses for the states which I believed had the highest probability of having Jews in them. So New York, New Jersey, California, Michigan, and so on. Not too many. I looked for passenger lists to Ellis Island in New York between the years 1879 and 1920. So it's a huge amount of search. And the SSDI, which is the Social Security Death Index. And that took me a long time. And the result was there was no Silberkasten. It didn't exist, as if, this reinforced the myth aspect of this research about Moshe Silberkasten. What I didn't know was that if I had typed Silberkasten with an S, I would have found information. And eventually, that's exactly what I did. And here I found a Sylvia Silberkasten, her certificate of death. She died in 1979 in Manhattan. And she was 64 years old. And the other side of that little card, microfilm little card, was most interesting. She lived in New York. She never married. There was the name of an Elias Silberkasten, who was her father. And then her mother was Rachel. And then the informant of her death was a Murray Kasten, her brother. And this was in Florida. And she was buried, Sylvia was buried in Mount Golda Cemetery in Long Island in New York. She died in 1979, as I said. So this was the only Silberkasten I could find at this point. And of course, I had no idea whether there was a link between Sylvia and Elias and Murray and Moshe. No idea. At the time, 1995, a new website. This was the beginning of an internet, really. There was a website called Jewish Gem, which everybody knows today, of course. Today, it's a sea or an ocean of information. But at the time it was brand new. And what you could do is to ask questions to people, and people would answer you if they had information. So this was something really exciting. And so I virtually met by writing an old lady in Brooklyn. And the favorite pastime of that lady was to visit Jewish cemeteries on Sunday. She would stroll through cemeteries, Jewish cemeteries, and she loved it, and she recorded information. So I talked to her, and I asked her to find Sylvia Silberkasten and other Silberkasten if she could find any. So she found in Mount Judah Cemetery, she found a Rachel Silberkasten, probably the mother of Sylvia, as was indicated on Sylvia's death record. She found Sylvia in Mount Golda, indeed, and she found the Morris Silberkasten buried in Mount Hebron Cemetery in a special section, and she sent me a copy of that section, the entrance, and the entrance was the Yiddish Theatrical Alliance section, sorry. And so I said, this is it. This Morris must be Moshe. And so at some point I traveled myself there. I traveled on a conference, and I went to the Mount Hebron cemetery, found the section, and found Moshe Silberkasten tombstone. Moshe Silberkasten, 1886-1939. And in Yiddish, there was a simple sentence, I know from the Boyer von Besseren Yiddischen Theater, one of the best, one of the builders of the best theater, Yiddish theater. So I was really thrilled. This was it. And in that cemetery, there were all kinds of other actors and people involved with the Yiddish theater. And I was really very excited about all this. On the way back in New York, I spent some time at YIVO Institute for Jewish Research, which is dedicated to preservation and study of the history and culture of East European Jewry worldwide. And I asked the lady if she could find me some information about Moshe Silberkasten, and she came back with a big box with pictures, with posters, with all kinds of newspaper clips and so on and so forth, the posters. And he was Moshe Silberkasten, plenty of pictures as an actor. So that was it. He was really an actor. He was there, and I had more information about him, as you can see here. He was playing in the troupe of Maurice Schwartz, which was the biggest troupe at the time. And Maurice Schwartz is taken, the picture of Maurice Schwartz is here with Charlie Chaplin in 1925, and again in 1933. And even Albert Einstein met the Yiddish Art Theater, the troupe at the Yiddish Art Theater. And Maurice Silberkasten, Moshe, is here. And they were the best players, the best actors of the time were playing with Maurice Schwartz. You recognize Albert Einstein, of course, who wrote a little thank you letter for the performance and the invitation. And then I found out that the Yiddish Art Theater troupe traveled around the world, actually, and I show you a few pictures here. So this is the theater, the Yiddish Art Theater troupe in London, 1935. They are really laser-free, Celia Adler. These are very, top-level kind of artists, of art actors in the theater. And Maurice Schwartz is in the middle. That's again in 1935. They were playing Josche Kalb, which was a huge success at the time, written by the brother of Yitzhak Bashevis Singer in 1935. And these are posters, His Majesty's Theatre. They were playing Tuvia der Milchiker and God, Man and Devil, Gott, Mensch und Teufel und Teufel. Here is Moshe Silberkasten. And then in Belgium, they traveled to Belgium. If there are some Belgians among you, in the audience. The top one is in Brussels and Antwerp on the 4th of July, 1935. And then at the bottom is this is Brussels and Antwerp. And at the bottom is the Théâtre Royal des Galeries, which is in Brussels. And this was for 4 days, from Freitag the 5th bis Dienstag the 9th, again in 1935. And he played all over the places. I mean, you find in those archives, you can find, a huge amount of places where the Maurice Schwarz Truppe was playing. There is the Yiddish Art Theater, the, sorry, the Bruder Ashkenazi, again, Yiddish Art Theater, the Roland Theater, Schleunke, Charlatan, again, a smaller version of the troupe in the Roland Theater. And eventually, Moshe ended up in the Hebrew Actors Union, which was a kind of a board of all the players, the actors. It's the executive of the Hebrew Actors Union, and the manager was Rubin Guskin. So I had information. I had a lot of information, but I wanted to find out, and this is really where the whole thing starts. I wanted to find out when and how he left Europe and moved to America. I wanted to find out the circumstances. So what you do, the first step you do when you do something like this is to see if he became American, US citizen. And becoming a US citizen has 3 steps. The first step was a declaration of intention, which I found for him, and it contains lots of information. He is an actor, Maurice Silberkasten. This is in Massachusetts at this point. He emigrated to the United States of America from Kobe, Japan, on the vessel Avomaru. Foreign residence was Harbin, China. His wife is married. The name of his wife is Molly, which is Malka. She was born in Russia and now resides with me. And what else is interesting here? What is most interesting actually, I arrived at the port of Seattle in the state of Washington on the 17th May, 1916. And the interesting sentence at the end is, I'm not an anarchist, I'm not a polygamist, nor a believer in the practice of polygamy. It's in my intention, good faith, to become a citizen of the United States of America. And he signs Maurice Silberkasten. This is 1921. First step, as you see here, 1916. Where is Kobe? Kobe is in Japan. And Harbin is in China, in the north part of China. Let me say a few words about Harbin, because it's a very interesting place. It's like most of the Chinese cities you've never heard of. Harbin is larger than New York, actually, with population around 10 million. It's part of an area which was known as Manchuria. It was not very well developed before the 19th century. It was under Russian dominance until 1917, when then China took control. There were pogroms in Russia, as you know, and people fled those pogroms, and reached Harbin, among other places, most of them Jewish, of course. Then also demobilized Jewish soldiers settled in Harbin at the end of the Russo-Japanese War, 1905. More Russian refugees during and after World War I and the Bolshevik Revolution. 1902, Harbin had about only 300 Jews and more than 10 Jewish-owned shops. But then in the 1920s, at its peak, it had 20,000 Jews, which is quite a lot. The title here is Harbin Today, 2005 and 2011, and the reason is that I made 2 trips to Harbin for professional reasons. It so happens that one of the biggest centers in my field, material science, is located in Harbin, and so I went twice there for conferences. The second time I went there with 2 of my kids, the 2 boys. There was no anti-Semitism in China. It had no tradition of anti-Semitism. And the Jew could live in Harbin without any fear and make a good living also. They were at some point two major synagogues, the main synagogue or the old synagogue and the new synagogue. There was a Jewish library, a Talmud Torah, an elementary and a secondary school, a cemetery, a women's charitable organization, a soup kitchen, a home for the aged, a Jewish hospital which treated both Jews and non-Jews. And these are pictures I took in Harbin when I was there. So there is a new synagogue, there is the Jewish hospital, there is a Jewish middle school, the Judaic private hospital on the left, the Jewish synagogue on the right, and then there is this coffee bar on the bottom left side. The coffee bar, we went there. I was there with with my two boys. As you can see, my two boys are on the lower right picture with this lady, and she's a guide inside there is a museum, local museum of Jewish history in Harbin, and she guided us. So the coffee was very nice. There was a piano. One of my sons played the piano there, and it was really kind of very strange to find ourselves in a place like this. And there is so much Jewish atmosphere. Another piece of information, a few more information pieces. Jews were furriers, bankers, bakers, shopkeepers, restaurateurs, teachers, and people of letters and the arts. They owned coal mines, lumber mills, breweries, and candy factories. They were doing well. The Hotel Modern, which was owned by Jews, boasted a restaurant, a cinema, a billiard room, a bar, and barbershop. Now, you have to understand that the architecture of all the buildings there is actually very much like in Russia, and not at all like in a typical Chinese city. So Harbin became known as the Oriental St. Petersburg and the Paris of the Orient. It had rich cultural life, and it was also called the City of Music. And between 1918 and 1930, about 20 Jewish newspapers and periodicals were published in Harbin. There was an original Jewish cemetery with about 600 graves, which were in central Harbin, but then they were moved to an eastern part of the city in 1952. And that's the Huangshan Jewish Cemetery, which has many visitors from Israel, among other places. One of them was Ehud Olmert's father, who is buried there. And then there is a Professor Dan Ben Canaan, whom I'm in touch with, and he was proclaimed by the Academy of Social Science as the first Jew to settle in Harbin. He lives there in the 21st century. He teaches in the School of Western Studies of Heilongjiang University, and is director of the Sino-Israel Research and Study Center there, which maintains extensive archives on Harbin Jewish history. He has that museum on the history of the life of Jewish people. And he said that I'm the president of the community here, which consists of me and me alone, which is great because I don't have to argue with anyone. He is there, he lives there, and the problem with the archives in Harbin, the real problem, when I was there, I asked to see the archives. They are closed. They are closed forever, it seems, because I asked Ben Canaan, why is the archives closed? I like archives and I want to know about my great-grandfather. Well, they are closed, most likely, he said, most likely because the Chinese are afraid of people coming to claim properties. Well, it's probably the reason. At any rate, there is no way to access those archives, which is a pity, really. Regarding the theater, there is the Danilov Theater on the left top, and then there is the Cinema Theater of the Hotel Modern at the bottom left. And they have in Chinese, there's this picture with Einstein. The Chinese people are fascinated with Einstein. even more than the usual people around the world. Moshe Zilberkasten found himself as a stage manager of a famous troupe of the time, which is the Lipovsky troupe. Remember that name because it will come back a little later. Back to America. In 1923, 2 years after the declaration of intention, someone who wants to become an American, a US citizen, fills a petition for naturalization. That's the second step. This is handwritten. It's very difficult to, or it's quite difficult to decipher. But again, he says he's an actor. His name is Maurice Hirsch. This time, he also signs as Maurice Hirsch Zilberkasten. This is 2 years later, 1923. And again, he says that he's married. He came on the Avamaru in 1916 to Harbin. He arrived in Seattle. Seattle, that's indicated here, in May 1916 on the Avamaru. And he intends to live in Boston. His wife, Molly, is living there with him. And Max, her son, was born in 19 of December 1910 in Russia. He's also with me, he says. And then he signs this. So that's the second step. And then you can get the list, the manifest, or the list of passengers on that particular ship coming from Kobe, Japan, April 29, 1916. Again, it's very difficult to read. This one is still fair. And what you see is coming from Kobe, Japan. And then you see here, Zilberkasten, he signs Hirsch. If you can read this, I think yes. So it's Zilberkasten Hirsch. He's 28, I think. And he's an actor. His wife is Malka Zilberkasten. She's not listed on this manifest. And also coming from Harbin. So, my full name was in fact Hirsch Moshek. That's what's completely new for me, but was confirmed later because I scanned a lot the Polish archives, I explored them, and his grandfather was indeed Gersh Moshek. Gersh in Russian is Hersh. Hirsch Moshek, but he goes by the name of Moshek. Malka Molly, his wife, my great-grandmother, was living with him in New York. And so they apparently did not split or divorce in Warsaw, as I thought, but possibly much later in the US. So that was what I could learn from this set of documents. And the question is, when did Malka Molly, arrive in the US and from where? And how about their son, David, my grandfather, or Max, because he's listed as Max on the petition for citizenship. I found out quite quickly that Malka used the same line as Moshe only 2 months later on another ship, the Sadomaru. It's the same line, it's the NYK line, which goes from Hong Kong to Kobe to Yokohama to Seattle. And these are the two boats that they have used, the Avamaru and the Sadomaru. Sadomaru was Malka's boat. Again, I go to the manifest, and it's even worse, much more difficult to read. And she's there, so that's the Sadomaru arriving in July 1916. This is Zilberkasten Malka, but interestingly, there is the name Zilbert, and then that's crossed, and she indicates Silberkasten, Malka. She comes from Harbin, and she goes to Seattle, Washington. There is another Silberkasten on this list, and it's Michael, Misha. It's again listed as Silbert, crossed, and then it's Silberkasten, Misha, Michael, and same information about Harbin, and he was born in Nikolaev, Kherson in Russia. So Malka and her, Michael, David, were staying with him in Harbin, then in New York too. However, I knew that Malka was living in Belgium in the mid-1920s with Benzion Wagner. I had evidence of that, and there is plenty of this. Malka must have left back to Europe with David or Max, Michael, Misha at some point. And I know also that Moshe divorced before 1927. How do I know this? Because in 1927, Moshe marries Gertrude Stein. This is not the writer, the famous Gertrude Stein writer, but she's a theater actress in New York City. And on the marriage record, Moshe is listed as divorced. This is 1927. He's listed as divorced. He's an actor. And I also get kind of a gift because of his father's name is Solomon, as you can read there, and his mother is Leah. I didn't know this, so I extended my family tree there. She's 23, he's 35 at the time, and one of the witnesses is also a theater actor, Abraham. There are plenty of theater actor in this whole presentation here. This is Gertrude Stein, his young wife, theater actress in New York City. But then he dies suddenly in 1939. He dies suddenly in Detroit on a tour with the Yiddish Art Theater. His age is 51 years of age. This is from the forward, the Daily Forward, Jewish Daily Forward, printed in New York. I found this in a microfilm at the National Library of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And it's in Yiddish, Moshe Silberkasten, bekannter Schauspieler, plötzlich gestorben, suddenly dies. And then there is a description of how he died in his room at the hotel at 6:30 in the morning. They found him. Then at the time I was reading a lot about Yiddish theater, and it so happened that some of the Yiddish theater had been made for movies. And I found a list in one of those books. I found a list of, I think, 13 or so movies, Yiddish movies, as you can see here. And these 13 had been refurbished or renovated because most of the movies had been destroyed because of the quality of the film, the plastic film. And this one, 1937, Wo ist mein Kind? Maurice Silberkasten is playing along with Celia Adler, the famous actor. And so I was thrilled because I could perhaps see the movie. So I wrote down the phone number of the National Center for Jewish Film, and I called them from here, from Israel, and the lady there was very nice. I asked her if next time I was in Boston, because this is in Brandeis University, next time I was in the States, in Boston, if I could see the movie, because I think that my great-grandfather is playing in it. And she said very nicely, Yes, of course, you're welcome any day, anytime to Boston, but you don't have to do that because I can send you a copy. It's been transferred to a video. And so she sent the video. And this is Where is My Child? Who is My Kind? The video. And here is my great grandfather resuscitated. I showed this movie to my father, who on my way back to Israel, he lived in Belgium. I showed this movie to my father, and my father started to cry because a myth had been transformed into reality, and he could see his grandfather, who actually physically looked a little bit like him, uh, same hair and so on. So now we're moving to September 2019. And why? Because this was the situation until September 2019, and something was wrong. I mean, I could feel that something didn't ring correctly. So I started listing the facts. In the 1920s, I knew that Molly, was living in Belgium. I knew this because I knew it because I have a biography for her, and my grandfather David, her son, told me that. And but he never, my grandfather David, who lived here in Netanya, who was born in 1911, never mentioned staying in the US as a kid, and he should have remembered actually because he was old enough to remember. So something was really wrong in this story. And so I had a fresh look at all the documents I had, which I had found on Ancestry.com. And this you saw already. I showed you that already. And I found this one, a declaration of intention for Manya Zilber, I'm going to magnify this a bit, which had the following information. That's her name. She was born in Nikolaev, Russia, in 1890. And then the name of my husband was Maurice, which is correct. They were married in 1909 in Warsaw, Poland. And they have one child, or she has one child, Max, who was born in 19 of December 1910 in Russia and lives and resides in New York. And she was divorced in 1925. The last foreign residence was in Harbin, which everything sounds okay here. And she emigrated from Yokohama, which is fine. And under the name of Silverkasten Malka, and note that she was Manya Zilber originally at the top, and she arrived in 1970. Then there is declaration of intention for Max Zilber, who landed in, as you can see here at the top, who landed in Seattle as Michael Silverkasten. And he was born in Nikolaev in 1910, December 1910. And she arrived, as I said, as Silverkasten Michael on the Sadomao in 1916. So, and there is on those, you see, this is a 1934 declaration of intention. So sometimes, quite a lot, you have also pictures, which you didn't have before. So this is Malka Silberkasten or Manya Zilber. It's the same person, Malka Silberkasten and Manya Zilber, of course. And on the right, you have Max, her son, Max Zilber. He was born in Kherson. And this is a new marriage for Malka, for this Manya Malka, in 1926. She marries another actor, theater actor, Matthew Cummins. She's an actress too, and she mentioned there that she divorced in Ohio in 1925. This was divorce from Moshe Zilberkasten. And that was right. That was correct. So the problem was that here her parents were listed as Harry and Mary Zaslavsky. And that's Mania Malka. My Malka, the parents were David Ritten and Sarah Goldberg, and they were from Lublin. Okay, so that was a problem already. So on the left here, you have Malka Molly Mania Zilberkasten, who became Cummins on that marriage here, and possibly born Zilbert. And on the right, you have my great-grandmother, Malka Mali Zilberkasten, who became later Wagner, and she was born Ritten. So, and she is buried in Cholon, in Tel Aviv, as Malka Mali Molly Ritten. And so I know that her details are correct. But this is not the same person. We have now two Malka Zilberkasten, Molly Zilberkasten, two of them, and I'm wondering what's going on. I mean, what happened? Which is the one that who arrived in Seattle? Moreover, we have Max Michael Misha Zilberkasten Zilbert, who is the son of that Malka. And we have my grandfather, David Zilberkasten Wagner, who became Barstav, later arriving in Israel, doesn't matter. But that's Malka's son. And he is buried in Netanya. David Barstav, Ben Zion Wagner, died in 1994. He's buried in Netanya. And obviously, it's not the same person either. So my grandfather, David, and his mother, my Malka, never went to America, obviously. And the question is, who was actually my David father and who was Max's father? This is a question I started asking myself, and it was really puzzling. So let's summarize this. Malka Ritten is with Moshe Zilberkasten first in Warsaw, but there is no marriage record. It's just family memory. There is no joint picture, never. I never saw a joint picture of my Moshe with my Malka. And she never called herself Zilberkasten either. Her son David, my grandfather, always mentioned that Moshe was his father. I even have a small picture that he gave me. It's not very convincing because he's a small boy sitting on the lap of his father, Moshe. But, you can't recognize any of the two. Then we have Malka Zilbert, who married Moshe Zilberkasten in 1909 in Warsaw. There is no marriage record. It's very difficult. Warsaw is very difficult to explore in terms of civil records. There is no marriage record, but she wrote it on declaration of intention. So at least that is indicated. Moshe wrote on his second marriage record with Gertrude Stein that he was divorced. Malka Mania did the same on her marriage record with Cummins in Philadelphia. So that is consistent. And Max was born on 19 December 1910 in Warsaw. The father is not known, and Malka Mania never declared it. She never indicates herself with her husband. And David, he was born in September 1911 in Warsaw, and the father is most likely Moshe Zilberkasten. That's I'm pretty sure of it. So, speculation. Let's speculate. This is Max on the left, Max Zilber, from his declaration of intention. And on the right, you have Moshe, my Moshe Zilberkasten. And the question is, could he be Max's father? Look at how they look like. I mean, they're almost twins. They look very much like each other. So in that case, Moshe would be the father of both Max and David. They would be half brothers. And Max's descendants, if any, would be related to David's descendants and also to me. So next step is in June 2022. This is an evolving story, and I started searching for the grave of Max Zilber, this Max, who was born in, I remind you, on 19th of December 1910. And hopefully the hope was to find out if his father indicated on the grave was possibly Moshe. So to find a grave, what you do is to go on the database, findagrave.com. And I found it. The memorial page for Max Silber, born 19th of December 1910, which is the right date, died in 1976, buried in Sharon Gardens Cemetery in Valhalla, Westchester County in New York. Here is what's indicated on his tombstone. Max Silber, December 19, 1910, August 14, 1976, beloved husband, father, grandfather. But the most interesting information, his name is Michael, like on the manifest, and his father is Moshe. So Moshe could be any Moshe, but I tend to think that he indicated the name of his real father as was told to him by his mother, Malka, Molly. So Malka is also buried there. And Malka's father is David, and that contradicts a bit what she wrote on her second marriage. Her name was Malka, or May Zilber, as he was named in the US. Not Zilberkasten, not Cummins, Silber. And she was born at the right date, 1890. She died in 1961. Beloved mother and grandmother. So was Zilber actually, why did you write Zilber? Maybe it was a name at birth, or was it shortened from Zilberkasten? I don't know. And there is also a Rachel, which is most likely Max's wife. This is a little bit less interesting, but they are all buried at the same place. So that's another piece in the puzzle. Zilber, Zilbert, Zilbert. Why was the name replaced by Zilberkasten when they landed in Seattle from Zilbert? It was, see, it was erased there. And there is a strange twist to this strange story already. Ben-Zion Wagner has a membership card as an artist in Warsaw. It's in Polish. It's in 1922. Ben-Zion Wagner is the husband of Malka Ritten. And Ben-Zion Wagner, in his membership card, signs 4 times in Polish, in Yiddish, as Zilbert, for whatever reason. This is the card, the membership card, Deklaracja. Ben-Zion Wagner, he writes the pseudonym Zilbert, and then at the bottom he signs Unterschrift Ben-Zion Wagner. It's difficult to read, but that's his signature. And then in parentheses, Zilbert. And on the other side, you have Ben-Zion Wagner Zilbert. And again, he signs Ben-Zion Wagner, B. Wagner Zilbert. This is total mystery for me, and I'm stuck here. And with that Zilbert pseudonym, which I have no idea why he wrote it. And it's kind of very strange. There is another question. Is it conceivable that both Malka, the both of them, and Max and David, Moshe, Zilberkasten, and Ben-Zion Wagner, this interesting quadrangle, all ever met in Harbin, in China? When you go over the biographies in Zilberzweig, Lexikon für Jiddischen Theater and Yiddish Literature, there's another one, and also there is Stephen Lasky's Museum of the Yiddish Theater, which is online. If you compare the biography, you find that in 1914-15, which is the time they were there in Harbin, you find that Ben-Zion performed in Yiddish theater in Siberia and the Far East, Vladivostok, which is which is Siberia. Actually, it's the Ural, and it's far away, and it's in between Harbin and Kobe, Japan. So he was in Siberia. Malka Ritten performed in Siberia with Nahum Lipovsky, who took his troops to Harbin. That's my Malka. And Moshe Zilberkas and Malka Zilbert, the other Malka, resided in Harbin, where Moshe was stage manager of the Lipovsky troupe. So, you can imagine that at some point, the three of them were meeting or were performing, perhaps, in Harbin together. I have no way to prove this at this point, but the dates correspond, and what they do in which troop, and everything corresponds. So I'm not going to show you this, but what I told you is just a condensed version of this family tree of theater actors. Moshe was married to Malka, and Malka was then married to, Moshe and Malka, I don't know if they were married, but they were together for sure because they had a son, David, my grandfather. Then Malka was married, I guess. I didn't find a marriage. With Ben-Zion Wagner, they had a daughter, Miriam. But Ben-Zion, before all that, Ben-Zion was married before meeting Malka. He was married with Elka Rosen, who was also a theater actor. And Moshe, on the other hand, was married with Malka Molly Zilber, that's the other one, and they possibly had a son, Michael. That was her son, but possibly with Moshe. And Malka divorced Moshe and married Matthew Cummins, who was also a theater actor. Moshe was then divorced from Malka Molly and married Gertrude Stein, as I showed you, Gertie, and she was also a theater actor. So they all enjoyed that. And then later on, she married a Leon Schachter, I found out, and he might have been also a theater actor. I'm not sure 100% of that. To conclude, more or less, all Silberkasten branches connect and originate from a common ancestor in Warsaw. Silberkasten is a rare surname, and the branches connect, all of them, and there is only one ancestor, a single ancestor, Hirsch, who was born in 1730. I have done all the research, and I have all the Silberkastens from Warsaw. They're all in Warsaw. There are lots of tombstones in the Warsaw Cemetery at the Kopowa Road in Warsaw. The descendants live a little bit everywhere, in San Francisco, Las Vegas, Buenos Aires, Madrid, Paris, Brussels, Sydney, Rehovot, and Wałbrzych. Wałbrzych is a small town in Poland. He was the first Silberkasten whom I met, actually, in all this research. It was a long time ago. And he's called Jan Silberkasten. He's a Jehovah's Witness, and he suffered because he's both a Jehovah's Witness and has a Jewish name, Silberkasten. He suffers because Jehovah's Witness cannot take arms, and so he spent a year in prison in Poland because he didn't want to be enlisted in the army. And he works as a postman. He's a simple person. He's a very nice person. He works as a postman, and he suffered because of his Jewish name at the post office. This is destiny. Thank you very much for listening. And as a conclusion, you can say that for actors, life is just another very big, very large, very big theater stage. Thank you very much. And I want to thank Stephen Lasky for providing some interesting information. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Wagner. We have just a few minutes left. If there are some questions, if you hover over the bottom of the screen, you'll see it says Q&A, and you can write your questions in there. So we'll just give another few minutes to see if someone would like to ask something.
Where do I see this?
Danny, if you hover
yes.
on the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A.
Bottom of the screen? No, I don't
A
have that.
question now from Larry Mandel. Do you see it?
Not really. Wait.
Okay, it says, what was daily life like in Harbin?
I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, apparently for the Jewish community, it was very good. I mean, they were all doing well. Uh, Daily life. What do you mean by daily life? It's extremely cold there. Extremely cold. They built every winter. They built a town of ice. A little bit. There is one like that also in Canada somewhere. But they built that houses, and it's very beautiful. Another thing I visited, it's a big city. I mean, it's 10 million people.
Dan, I'm going to stop you for just a minute because Larry writes that his grandfather was there when yours was, and he has actually been to Harbin. He meant their lives. What were their lives like?
Their lives. Yes, well, what I'm just saying is what I know about Harbin, about their lives. I don't know what specifically you want to hear. What they ate. What The question is unspecific, so I'm not sure what you mean. As I said, I think they had a good life because they were well off. Many of them, most of them, I guess. Um, um,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, go on.
There is
There is also another thing. There is a huge zoo with tigers, and the tigers, they are extremely impressive. So I don't know if they had tigers in the 1910, 20s, and 30s, but it's a very impressive place to visit anyway. And that's what I can tell you. I spent my time doing science there most of the time. So that's what I can tell you about my experience of Harbin.
So we have another question from Apsel Marcel.
I know him.
Okay.
He's from
So
Belgium.
he writes, can you see the questions and answers, Danny, or should I read
No,
it?
I can't. I can't. I don't have that.
A little embarrassing, but could it be that Moshe Silberkasten had an affair and therefore there were no official records?
The short answer is yes, absolutely. But it certainly could be okay. It's complicated, even in my mind. Uh, the birth of David, I couldn't find his birth record. I couldn't find his parents, or Malka, Molly, my Malka, and Moshe. I couldn't find a marriage certificate, but it doesn't mean anything because it's very, very. It's like the data in Warsaw is like a Swiss cheese. There are more holes than cheese, and it's very difficult to find a specific birth certificate or wedding certificate. There were millions of Jews there, and it's very difficult, and not because there were millions, but because a lot have been lost. So I don't have official papers for their marriage. It certainly is possible that you see, Malka, my Malka, never called herself Silberkasten, never. And so that indicates to me that maybe, they were not married indeed. And David, my grandfather, was born out of that affair. No proof of this and no proof of the opposite. So it's possible. Yes, definitely. And, they were theater actors. And these are pretty white people. At the time, they were pretty white people. I mean, as you can see from all the marriages and the getting together. So yes, but the short answer is yes, it's possible. Marcel,
Okay.
I hope you feel okay, Marcel. I haven't heard from you for quite a while.
And one last question because of our time is actually over. Paulette Bronstein asks if you tested your DNA and have you found any Silberkasten family members using DNA?
It's an excellent question, of course. I have my DNA. I've made my DNA testing, but mostly for another research I'm doing on a different branch. I've not been successful in convincing Jan Silberkasten to test his DNA. He said, yes, yes, of course I will do it, but not now, I'm busy and so on. So people are kind of, not really warm about the idea. I will tell you something that I haven't told you here, is that I think 90%, I have a 90%, there is a 90% probability that I know who the descendants of Max Silber are. Okay, so that's the parallel branch. And if Max was indeed Moshe Silberkasten's son, his DNA would be a little bit similar to mine, and his descendants' DNA would be similar to mine. Now, I have searched for the descendants of Max. I think I found them. They don't answer. Well, there was one or two. It's the same. It's a unique last name, and I have a list of about 6 or 7 of them. And the only thing I have is a Facebook page for all of them, or for most of them. And they are not willing to engage a conversation in general. I don't know if it's because they don't like Facebook, which is fine. But I have the feeling they don't want to talk about this. I don't know why. So I'm going to leave it like that. What can I do? But that's the solution actually for solving that problem. If I ever want to solve that problem and find more family members, parallel family members, half cousins and so on, that's the way to go, of course. I've done it. Jan also is reticent. He doesn't really want to do a DNA test. So that's what I can tell you. But that's the right way to go, of course. The only way to go.
So I want to thank Professor Wagner for his presentation and thank all of our participants for joining in this evening. And we look forward to seeing you at our next presentation.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all. Bye-bye. Thank you. Lynn, can you still hear me?
I can't.
Okay, Lynn?